in Pakistan, challenges, opportunities, and way forward with a particular emphasis on the innovative side. Also, Pakistan has a comprehensive and well-established social protection system, but the rising inflation in the country is exerting immense pressure on the economy, particularly the informal sector. We have also seen that the government of Pakistan has been experiencing consistent pressure from the IMF to increase the tax net and reduce the non-development expenditures. In view of the current economic crisis, rising fuel prices and food inflation, the economy faces a plethora of challenges that include aggravated poverty, inflationary pressures, inadequate health care insurance, climate change, disaster, etc. Under these circumstances, it is imperative that the social safety net is extended to the vulnerable population through systematic and synergized approaches. With this background in mind, we are thankful to the August panel that have joined us to share a thought on the current social protection realm and to provide us with staunch recommendations that will be floated to the government of Pakistan. Before we start off with the moderated discussion today, I would like to introduce the esteemed panelists. We have been joined by Dr. Safdar Suhail, who is Executive Director, Social Protection Resource Center, Mohammad Mustafa Khan Saab, Technical Advisor, Social Protection at GIZ, and Dr. Fariha Armaghan, who is heading Center for Evidence Action Research at STPI. And shortly we'll be joined by Dr. Sajid Amin Javed, who is the Deputy Executive Director Research at STPI. To start off today's discussion, I'll steer the floor to Dr. Safdar Suhail Saab to shed light on the right-based approaches. We know that when we talk about right-based approaches, it aims to enable all people to be active citizen, empowered to claim their right. So, Dr. Saab, I'll request, in perspective of your experience, to shed light on the current state of the informal sector in Pakistan from the perspective of social protection. Over to you, Dr. Saab.
Thank you very much. It's good, like always, to be here with the colleagues at STPI. And the topic today, obviously, is extremely important. And as you have also pointed out, towards the socioeconomic situation or condition that we have. Now, while inviting me to talk about tackle the topic of today, you said that you expect me to speak about the right-based approach, and you would also like me to talk about the informal sector also. Now, I'll try to relate that with the articulation of the concept note that STPI has shared, which talks about the key social protection challenges and the emerging needs that are there, and then how to kind of develop our program in the long term and see the possibilities of its integration or its interlogging with other economic or development policies to spur economic growth. The last point regarding empowerment of women, I am sure Dr. Fariha would be tackling that. Now, I would like to divide my talk in two parts. One is that the current economic situation is very bad. Now, we hear often that even the middle class now is becoming poor, and there's a big hit due to inflation. We all know the situation. So vis-a-vis the challenge, what is the arrangement on the side of the government to meet the challenge. And how do we define meeting the challenge? If we define the challenge as a social safety requirement that people have, so then we go to the definition of social safety nets and the history for that, which is of course linked with the overall narrative that growth takes time for its dividends to come down, trickle down. If trickle down does not happen, then you need to have social safety nets. In that context, you have income transfer programs, social transfers that you call, and we also have that. That is okay. That is fine. In a country which has a history of poverty, you should have social transfers. And the world has been experimenting with social transfers since long. So it was good to have a Benazir income support program and put in place an efficient system of delivery of enlisting people also. And that has helped us in many previous challenges that we had. For example, during floods, during COVID, it was good to have an efficient system of transfers. Obviously, one can always suggest or think that the transfers could have been more, for example, or the spread could have been better, but those are matters for detail in the sense that state has limitations in terms of provision of the fund. So in that context, one can always have so much. But the problem started in our context when we started using the term social protection for the income transfers, which basically changes the perspective, and many people would say that all that used to be treated under the idea of poverty reduction now is being treated under the term or idea of social protection. Now, in that context, I would say that the idea which is mainstreamed now, we need to see that if we are in a very serious problem, and this idea of social protection that we adopted, which also started saying that we would end poverty with the help of this social protection program, and we spent a lot of space and energy on devising strategies to graduate them out of poverty. So and the ESA's strategy document in the very first sentence says that it's a poverty reduction program. Where are we right now? So that's one major question to which I would like to draw the attention of the audience here. We also hear that this is a consumption smoothing transfer. Definitely that is important, but with the current level of transfer and the current level of poverty, I'm told by nobody else but then Dr. Abid Suleri himself that the current transfers take care only of the 20% of the food need of a household at the present prices. So even the consumption smoothing is limited. We cannot talk about the graduation out of poverty. So what is it today that we are calling social protection? And Dr. Fariha would perhaps remember last year there was one day dedicated entirely to social protection in the SDC. And in my talk, I gave my own analysis, which I had to give, concluding that if we do not change the way we use these expressions, BISP would become another Baitul Mal in due course of time, which it has already become. So if all that you have talked in your concept note, if you want this whatever you call, I mean, I don't call it social protection system. Income transfers is one part of any social protection system, particularly the right-based system. So there it is doing well. They have given them resources. They should give them more resources. This consumption smoothing is also very important for a large number of families. This is a lifeline which should be there. But the ideas, you see, there are two categories of ideas. One are the ideas which are self-legitimizing ideas of the institutional logic. Now, in current discourse, when we say social protection, this to me appears in the realm or category of a self-legitimizing idea, which the professionals or institutions use who are related directly with these. Now, if this seminar is looking for an idea for change, I don't know whether you agree with me or not, that this is not the social protection system that country needs, then next step we take that, okay, what kind of social protection system should Pakistan have? And there we enter into the other debate where rights would come in, and the bigger questions would come in, that why should we have a social protection system in the country? That is the starting point. Are you going to have rounds of questions, or so I should stop here, I guess?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sab. You've rightly pointed that we need to look into both the social protection and the social safety net concept at this moment. What we have seen that there are almost 126 windows that are existing currently, who are looking into both the social protection and the social safety net programs. So moving forward, I'll move to Mustafa Sab, being an expert on social protection and looking very closely to the social protection system in Pakistan. So I'll pose a very simple question to you, that what are the key social protection challenges being faced by Pakistan in the contemporary world? And the current social protection program that we have, is that program addressing the challenges that we are facing?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join this August forum. In terms of coming to your question of the challenges that the social protection, the country is facing in terms of social protection, I think, we can broadly categorize them into two categories: the demand side challenges and the supply side challenges. From a demand side perspective, Pakistan, as you, I'm sure most of you are aware, Pakistan is facing, an extreme economic challenge. The inflation rate is around 30% or so. Pakistan ranks around, has a multidimensional poverty index of around 38%, close to 40%. Over 40% of our children are out of school. Close to 35% of our children are stunted. So, I mean, Pakistan is the 8th most vulnerable nation to climate change. And basically the list goes on and on. So, I mean, the challenges that Pakistan is facing are huge, but, these challenges can definitely be transformed to an opportunity. For example, 30% of our population, 60% of our population is below the age of 30. So, I mean, now if you don't put this resource, this youth bulge into the proper, perspective, this is a challenge, but it's equally an opportunity. So, like Safdar Sahab said, I think we need to look at social protection from a broader perspective, and social protection is not only, giving income transfers, but it's much more than that. You need to like introduce conditionalities into your social protection tools and instruments, so that in order to enable people to graduate out of the programs and then out of poverty. So in that aspect, the active labor market programs, that are one of the key areas and one of the key opportunities that we need to look into from a perspective of this youth bulge that we are facing. Now I'll briefly, like come to the challenges that the sector is facing from a supply side. So I mean, in Pakistan, as social protection practitioners, I'm sure it's the same situation in other developing countries, but we often come across situations where there are a large number of diverse programs managed and designed in an ad hoc manner without any coherent policy framework. So I think, to start with, this is the first problem we have. Most of these programs, they were conceived or managed or designed with from a political economy, from a political, like mileage or political popularity perspective, and not, like actually keeping the need of the population into the perspective. So this is this challenge that which I call it, like a lack of a systems-based approach is, I think, in a nutshell, the problem we are facing. I think last year we had an opportunity to map social protection programs in one of the provinces, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provinces, and we were surprised to see that there were more than 50 programs, that are being that come under the ambit or umbrella definition of social protection, but they don't have any mechanism of coordination between them. So I mean, this coordination and integration or a systems-based approach need to like happen at three levels. At the policy level, we need to like have a strategic framework or a policy direction. At the design level, so that like you basically like don't end up with like multiple programs addressing the same vulnerabilities, but at the same time having other vulnerabilities for which we don't have any programs. And then we need to have this coordination and integration at the implementation level. So these three levels. At the implementation level, the examples would be using a common payment system, a common targeting system, a common like delivery mechanisms, and so I mean, in order to achieve the economies of scale. And naturally, without like there's a saying which says that if you don't measure something, you cannot achieve it. Most of these programs that are being executed at the provincial domains, at the federal level, we see that there's no proper mechanism for monitoring and evaluating them. So I mean, in order to see that what the purpose, the overarching purpose of the objective with which these programs were designed, to what extent they're able to achieve those. Most of the cash transfer programs we are running have an extremely inadequate benefit design. I mean, the level of the amount of benefit that they give is so inadequate that it hardly makes any difference to the lives of the beneficiaries. I'll give you a small example. The zakat is one of the biggest cash transfer programs that is being run in the provincial domains. The problem is, they after like months and months of like processes, they end up giving 1,000 rupees to one household per month. Now, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to sort of like realize that this amount doesn't make any difference whatsoever, and it is the same amount that has been given for the last, I think, 20 or 25 years. So, I mean, this is just very small example. And so I think I'll stop there and give.
Thank you. Thank you, Mustafa. So just one I could share the exact number. Almost 74.2% of the youth is under the age of 34, and by 2050, we're seeing that they'll be crossing 50, and the number of the the people above 50 would be increasing, and that would be implicating the economy in a very drastic manner. So what strategies do you think, Dr. Sahiba, are required at this moment that could be adopted by the government to promote the financial empowerment and livelihood, particularly for the women who are residing either there in the urban or the rural vicinity? And also, if you could highlight how that same model could be applicable in the second and tier cities as well.
Sure. So coming to your question, I mean, it's about the strategies. I mean, maybe if I can comment on the overall innovative strategies and then come to the gender aspect. So building on what Dr. Safdar mentioned, that there's a need to ponder upon the institutional logic of the social protection design itself. So rethinking social protection in terms of strategies that could be efficient for not only for youth, but also for gender aspect. So there's a need for a shift in the social protection design itself. One of the lessons that recent catastrophes they've given us is that the persistent vulnerability of low-income household. And there's this global evidence in which number of countries in the global south have realized that the informality is persistent and shocks are recurrent in nature. So one of the strategies that are going on in the world, and what we can do is that we can think contextually around it, even going down till the provincial character in terms of context. And we can also imitate the best international best practices. And certain successful strategies do have this promise and potential where they can prevail if applied to Pakistan. For example, one important pillar is to diversify the registry and compartmentalize the population of interest, make NSCR more inclusive. Right now, what is happening is that the core program is tackling the poor and the ultra poor with certain PMT scores, while the rest of the population of interest is in the peripheries, in programs in the peripheries. Again, here looping in the informal workers is very important. Again, it's not beating the bush around the missing middle, because the problem with the missing middle is that they are not eligible for social protection programs, for safety net, but they're not well off enough for the social insurance program mandated by the governments or for the formal sector. So they're kind of hanging in the air. And there's a need to have accelerated efforts toward it. And there's a need to loop in this missing middle. What happened during COVID, that there was a drive or a program that was announced toward giving this relief package to workers. But after 28 days of its announcement, it occurred that the data of workers is not available and this deliverance cannot take place. And if you see the social protection designs of the countries in Africa, the informal workers, the informal household enterprise owners, they're all part of the social protection registry. So we really need to ponder upon it, that how we can adjust the missing middle. The second important strategy, what the world is converging to, especially the developing countries, is saving, the first pillar of financial inclusion. And I will like to agree with Dr. Safdar that now consumption smoothing is definitely important. That is the ask from the social protection programs. But now we have to move these beneficiaries through full circle of financial inclusion, from savings, transitioning to borrowing, transitioning to digital payments, and then lastly, insurance, concerning which we have a very low insurance literacy in Pakistan. And the saving aspect is extremely important. And what the world is converging to is that they're introducing voluntary long-term saving schemes. And they come with certain design features, which I will discuss about. And these do come with short-term access to liquidity, because the constraint faced by these groups is that they cannot lock in their amounts because of their vulnerability for longer period of time. So there are certain conditionalities around it, but this is conducive as per, and these are tailor-made as per the population of interest, which is the poor. And the problem is that why this population needs such saving schemes, because the social insurance programs are not working for them, because these programs require a monthly contribution, which these groups cannot manage on their own. So one of the design feature of these program, one of the core design feature of these saving scheme is that it is co-contributing in nature. You have to incentivize poor to save. It's not going to come voluntarily. There must be some matching or co-contribution by the government to incentivize them to save and to have a certain kitty in the face of catastrophe. A second feature is easy integration. It is the tech and touch spectrum that poor can manage, easily manage. So they're not into complex designs of transactions or social protection instruments, but designs which are easy to manage. Third feature is that what these schemes are offering is identifying the aggregators to help expand this into the whole ecosystem. And of course, there are social protection institutions who are running these instruments, but these programs and these schemes are heavily embedded on institutions in which these beneficiaries have complete trust in. So we can say that this ecosystem is anchored in very strong and reliable institutions. And again, digital inclusion is a huge part of it. All of them, they benefit from this digital technology at different levels. And if you look at all the countries, whether I talk about India or I talk about other countries of South Asia or Africa, they do have a defined payment gateway system to facilitate this. Right now with current unconditional cash transfer design, what we have, it is conversion of digital money into cash. The interoperability factor is not there. Making digital transaction at retail units is not there. So we do need that. Even some little time ago, it was limited mandate account where the saving wallet was not operational in nature. Another part of the strategy, again, something which COVID has taught us, is to capitalize on social capital. And something we have been ignoring for past decades, and something which Ukhuwat realized is that what poor have is that they have social capital to bank upon. It's a bankable model. They're not in a position to offer financial collateral. So we need to revert to community-based model. There's hard global evidence, whether it's climate change, whether it's social protection, that women are the point of leverage for interventions. And the women have this thrift habit, which is actually consuming certain amount and saving certain amount for future. So this community networks or social capital can definitely be leveraged in terms of self-help group models. Self-help group models have been huge success stories in India, in African countries. So voluntary saving with matching contribution, with aspects of digital inclusion, with this proper M&E mechanism and hand-holding by social protection authorities. So this can be one of the innovative strategy. Another aspect is the asset transfer program. By the end of the day, thematic and programmatic diversity in the domain of social protection is needed. And graduation from unconditional cash programs to human development and livelihood programs is needed. And livelihood is not about capacity building. Standalone capacity building doesn't work. It's an overrated concept. There must be steps before capacity building. There must be post capacity building steps. So for example, there must be a need assessment. Where a social protection program is taking place, at what kind of demand mechanism exists in the market. There must be identification of a certain person within the beneficiary household who is the most able to have this, to pursue this livelihood generation program. There must be a labor market readiness program. And then there must be hand-holding throughout this capacity building process to actually setting up of the livelihood business, to transition of asset transfer, and then a very strong M&E mechanism. And again, a huge problem in this, why most of the programs, they do not actually culminate in an impact, is that we enter into social protection program design and instruments without a tangible theory of change. So we are very good with thinking of ACE programs, with coming up of design, with launching the intervention, but we lose all our rigor at M&E level. So that is the huge problem. And for decades, we have been confusing our result-based metrics, where we are actually finishing our journey at the level of outcome and confusing outcome with the impact. Success stories, simple tracer studies, or without a sound M&E framework, it's not going to generate impact. We have to actually quantify the impact, and we really have to see what kind of intervention work in terms of social protection instrument and what doesn't. And lastly, again, this shared vision is missing, which Mustafa Saab talked about. The synergies and the complementarities, cognitive architecture in social protection is missing, where the core institutions of social protection are in line with auxiliary institutions, organization, with provincial authorities, and there's so much of overlapping. I really sometimes think that some of the social protection, and this is what I've witnessed in field as well, that there's certain social protection beneficiaries or number of households who are overprivileged in terms of receiving programs, because they're receiving one program, another program, then a third one, just because they're privileged enough to be part of NACR. So there must be these, of course, strategies and innovative strategies from the supply side as well, in terms of institutional rollout, that are very much important. And then maybe I can come to gender later. When you take other pet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Saiba, for highlighting innovative strategies that could be supportive for improving the social protection realm in Pakistan. I'll come to Dr. Safdar Saab, keeping in view when we talk about social protection, and in your earlier comments you had highlighted that in social protection overall realm, it also includes the universal pensions, that also part of it, simultaneously health, life insurance, that are also an integral part of it. Informal sector again is something that needs to be looked into. So my question to you is, how can social protection be better integrated with other development policies in Pakistan that would be helpful in supporting the economic growth?
Thank you. I'll build upon the comments and observations of the two colleagues here. Integration is a term which is used very frequently, and as Mr. Mustafa and Dr. Fariha both have highlighted the needs, all the desirable integration that we should have, but integrating existing social protection initiatives, whom you decide to label as social protection initiatives, do they add up into a comprehensive social protection program? Again, the term program is a bad term. System is perhaps a better term. My answer is no. Even if you integrate, even if we come over all the traditional shortcomings that Mr. Mustafa pointed out, that the governance issues, you see the capacities and all that which needs to happen before the integration takes place. Even if we imagine that we are good in integrating all the programs, would it result in the appearance of a comprehensive social protection system? My answer is no, because of the very problems that I hinted at in the beginning, that the way what do we really want as a nation? Where do we want to go? Has the time not yet come of undertaking some basic discussions? Now, you have also pointed out in your introductory remarks of the challenges brought about by the inflation, by our public financial management system. Everybody knows what is happening in the country. Now, what kind of solutions are we now thinking of, they're all in the domain of an emergency. That system is under a serious pressure. And to me, this is also the time to think of the basics. Now, what is the basic for reviewing our social protection system in the long term? Now, if that is the question, then I think one has to, first of all, talk about the foundation for having a system of welfare in the country. I'm thinking of two thinkers here, which I would like to quote. Karl Polanyi talked about the double movement, where the market creates issues which need to be addressed, which became the foundation for a lot of responses. But I would say that this notion of double movement has not held very, very relevant in the long term. Mr. Mustafa also talked about the supply side and demand side, as if demand side is the recipient of a poor household who is the recipient of the income transfer is the demand side, and the supply side is the government which is giving the money. I think there are bigger phenomena at play here. This is the marketization of the economy and the society, which is creating those conditions where increasingly more and more people are becoming vulnerable. I don't like to use the word poor, but disenfranchised, disempowered. I remember more of Nancy Fraser, who talks about the third triple movement, that basically it is about distributive justice, recognition justice, and participation justice. So should our state be concerned about the justice, economic justice, which is a right of the citizens? If that is the foundation which our constitution also provides, then how do we rebuild the system afresh? Very quickly, it's a very complex topic. I would say that take health out and bring work in. Now, that is the fundamental reform. Again, the word reform is a problematic word. If we want to reorganize our welfare system, why do I say that take health out? We have seen the consequences of the monetization of health services in the form of Sehat Sahulat program, which is already, I would say, on its knees or even failed. It is suspended. So we have tried to move away from an in-kind provisioning of health services, which used to be state's responsibility. So from there, we went to the Sehat Sahulat model, which has not worked. And if the state can take care of the health needs, that actually can solve a major part of the economic vulnerability of the household in many ways. We all know the ballooning out-of-pocket expenditure on health, the catastrophic health shocks that we have, and this marketization in the health sector is having very, very serious implications in terms of cost, in terms of quality. And our friend Mr. Mustafa talked about the demographic dividend. If you look at the data, our healthy life expectancy is decreasing. If you do a disaggregated analysis of healthy aging, a healthy life expectancy in Pakistan, disaggregated on the basis of socio-economic situation and gender, Dr. Fariha, this is in late 40s. In Pakistan, for women or coming from poor households, healthy life expectancy is 49, which basically means 15-20 years of misery and disease and expenditure. If a household is freed from the expenditure cost on the parents. This in itself would make a big difference. So when we say universal social protection, we don't really say that we are not talking about universal basic income at all. What we say is that in some categories, like in disability, like in case of elderly, there has to be some universal arrangement. And in case of unemployed, there has to be some kind of arrangement. Otherwise, once you take care of the health and bring back work, as long as you do not make the work as the foundation stone for integration of all the activities of labor market programs and other conditional things, we would not be able to have a clearer picture of what is happening in the economy as well as in the society. I should stop here with a small comment on Dr. Fariha's observations regarding financial inclusion, which is very good. The asset transfers should also take place. But being a very active researcher, I would like to present to you an idea. In Brazil, recently a study has been done where they have suggested that the financial inclusion effected by the income transfer programs has actually become a conduit of household debt, and the loan sharks or loan givers are using income transfers as a collateral. And this digital access to the households is being used by the people who are giving loan. And it is now actually being counterproductive, that government gives very little, but government provides that data, easy access to every household. On the one hand, you are not closing the sources of economic vulnerability, which is another separate topic, that how government is continuing with these processes, our private sector is continuing with those processes which create economic vulnerabilities. And then you have exposed the poorer household through these modern fancy technologies to these loan sharks. And in Brazil, at least, the increase in the household debt is attributed to this phenomena. So has it happened in Pakistan also, that now our Pakistani households are under a much higher level of debt, which is partly attributable to this whole phenomenon? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking idea that you've just shared. I'll move to Mustafa. What are the specific needs of different vulnerable groups in Pakistan? And when we talk about groups, vulnerable groups, and that include women, children, elderly, people with disabilities. And how can social protection, I would use the word system rather than using the program from now, be better designed to meet these needs?
Thank you. So before I answer your question, I just wanted to make a brief comment on what Fariha said. I think, this mention of community-based innovative approaches, I think this is really important in our context because, if you look at the definition of social protection, it also includes not only public programs, but, those that are there in the private realm. So I'll just give you some figures, to think upon. Estimates, which, there was a report by Pakistan Center for Philanthropy back in 2016. And according to that estimate, close to somewhere around 600 to 700 billion rupees is the amount of money that Pakistanis give in charity. Zakat, sadaqat, philanthropy, different types of, most of it is basically religiously motivated. And, if you extrapolate the figure, it would be somewhere around close to 1,000 billion rupees, Now that is basically double the amount of this budget, 450 billion rupees. And also, if you look at the zakat that is channeled through the public system, is 7 to 8 billion for the whole country. So I mean, it's like around close to 150 times of the amount that is channeled through the government system. So I think, we should also, look at this community, the way our society is structured. We have a family, immediate family, then we have a extended family, then we have a community, we have a concept of neighborhood. So I mean, like what Dr. Faria said, that the poor have, what the poor have is the social capital. So I mean, those like community structures and those community-based support mechanisms also need to be like built upon, because that is the only sustainable source, and the government basically like needs to play the role of facilitator or intermediator in all that. The government basically needs to provide the platform. So I'll give you a small example. What we are doing with in KP with the Zakat department now is, we are basically building a digital, like a crowdfunding platform, wherein, because what the government has, it has, like the data at the grassroots level of all those people based on their vulnerabilities. So they have, like disaggregated data gender-wise, they have disaggregated data age-wise, they have vulnerability-wise data of the Zakat Mustahikeen who are poor, generally poor, who are old age, who are widowed, who are orphans, or who are persons with disability. But the government doesn't have the resources to, like give them an adequate amount of benefit. So I mean, what we are doing is, like we are building this digital crowdfunding platform in collaboration with the government of KP, where the general public using this mobile money, mobile based transfer, mobile banking, be able to, like simply, donate their zakat or sadaqat or their general charity based on geographical and vulnerability targeting. So I mean, naturally we'll be definitely, like paying due attention or consideration to the data privacy, anonymized data aspects. So yeah, so this was just, like a comment I wanted to make. Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
My question was, you have also highlighted in your comment that what specific needs of different vulnerable groups in Pakistan, as women, children, elderly, and the people with disabilities, can be addressed in the social protection program. And if you could highlight the initiatives that are being taken in consideration by GIZ at this moment.
I think the question is, like very broad. So I'll just, like maybe, like highlight a few aspects which, like come into my mind. I think, what is missing from our social protection landscape altogether is this link between our supply, the government social protection system, and the communities. So, I mean, if you look at the best practices, not even best practices, average practices, how social protection is basically, like managed across the world, it's basically at the community level. So you have a you have a case worker or a social worker approach. Now a social worker is an essential and integral part of the social protection delivery chain, because you cannot basically use blanket approaches for the type of vulnerabilities or the needs. Every individual is a unique case. For example, an old woman might have accessibility problems. She might be chronically poor. She might be, she might not have anyone in her family to take care of her. She might be, suffering from a disability due to old age. She might be suffering from some chronic diseases. She might be in need of some rehabilitative services. So, I mean, the list can go on. So every basically, beneficiary is a unique case in point. So, I mean, if you design a program and you try to address the vulnerabilities in a blanket approach, it doesn't work, and the example is in front of us, I can, tell you on fingertips many dozen programs that simply do not work. They have never been evaluated, they've never been monitored in the last, like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, they have been running. And the reason they're not monitored, the reason they're not very evaluated, because their practitioners, they know they don't work, So I mean, I think, that is the missing link. So the caseworker or the social worker that basically, goes door to door, and then, like it finds out about the unique blend or the mixed or the combination of services that household or that individual requires. I'll also give you a small example of from our like experience. This problem of registration of persons with disability. Now, persons with disability, these are one of the most vulnerable like segment of the population. I think we all agree on that. There's no second opinion about that. And currently, the situation that exists, around 50% of persons with disabilities are unregistered. So I mean, which means that they do not exist in the eyes of the government. The government cannot allocate resources for them because they do not exist in the government's databases. First of all, there's no disability registry, so as to speak. Now, estimates, the World Health Organization, all the other international estimates say that we have around, I mean, if you also include moderate and mild disability, close to 10 to 15% of our population is disabled. If you take the example of KP, the KP has a population of around 35 million people. So if you calculate 10%, close to 3.5 million people. The number of people registered in KP in the disability register is only 150,000. So I mean, it's simple mathematics. You can see, like this is, like if you include the mild and the moderate disabilities, close to 10% of people that are there, they are in the system. So I mean, I think we need to, like adapt approaches. I mean, it first starts with counting them. The first thing that needs to happen is, like making those processes, making those. I mean, most of these solutions are very simple. You don't need, like very high-tech solutions, very, not even, like, because the landscape in Pakistan is such that even the basics are not, like right, Once you set the basics, in order, then you start thinking of, like some advanced models or some advanced solutions. So, yeah, so I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. To Dr. Fariha, if you highlight.
Yes, sure. Gender aspect. Sure. If you allow me, before I come to the gender aspect, if I can respond to the points by Dr. Safdar and by Mustafa. So yes, I totally agree with you. Whenever microfinance is coupled with the poor and the destitute, it's not a workable phenomenon. And this is why there was a transition from microfinance to financial inclusion right in 2015 after the globally renowned 5 to 6 RCTs of Esther Duflo and Banerjee. And each of them was on microfinance, and the output by the end of the day was that microfinance is not the silver bullet. It does not lift the poor and the destitute out of abject poverty, for the reason that the microfinance hurts the poor through high interest ceilings. And there have been reports that even some 8 or 9 years ago, these interest ceilings went up to 33%. And this is what creates the debt and the poverty trap, and they're not able to come out. Even there's a lot of evidence that even Grameen poor borrowers, they remained poor because of this aspect. So this is why the financial inclusion strategy came in 2016, and this Maya Declaration and SDGs and NFIS, National Financial Inclusion Strategies globally, not even for developing countries, but also for developed countries. So the ideal mechanism is, and Pakistan is quite conducive for it, because in Pakistan, the National Financial Inclusion Strategy is given by the central bank. And in Pakistan, the gatekeeper of financial inclusion is the banking sector. This is the one that is deeply embedded, has actually refined over time. and in a very good position to offer financial inclusion for all, not just for the privileged segments of the society. And this is where they need to come in. For example, I was referring to the community-based models of self-help group. So in what happens in this self-help group, that there are no loan sharks. The social protection authorities come in, the government come in, they actually identify a certain bank, they create these self-help group of some 20 to 25 women, certain communities, there's voluntary saving, again, there are multiple models, contributory saving, matching, and then that amount is parked, for example, in a bank, and then that particular amount is given out as loan to one of the members. And not only they have this opportunity to create livelihoods, they also have this opportunity to utilize the interest that is given on the parked amount. And again, it's small, easy installments that favors them. And again, the idea of fleecing is out of the system. There's no microfinance coming in. So the governments in the developing countries and of course the banking sector needs to come in and see this aspect. So of course, but when, for example, in Brazil, if there are loan sharks of microfinance coming in and income transfer as collateral, of course, that is going to hurt the poor. And my observation doing the fields, and especially in South Punjab and KP, I have seen these beneficiaries, they're smart enough to play the Ponzi game. For example, they do have this ability to acquire new debt by to re-roll their prior debt, acquiring new debt. And they do have this credibility in their community that since they are best beneficiaries, they do take from the local Kirana store, they do take grocery in advance, that and the shopkeeper knows that this amount would be coming in, and there won't be any delinquency regarding that. So they have become street smart over time for dealing with certain level of financial technicalities or capabilities. And coming to Mustafa's points of community-based, again, community becomes of integral importance when we factor in disaster resilience. When we talk about adaptive social protection, so catastrophe, when it hits, all the relief work starts at the grassroots level. It's a community where it is dealt with. And just referring to that, last year we had a full day session on social protection. So the main themes were preparing the vulnerable for the next disaster, like how they can cope with the coping strategies for dealing with the disaster, and then capacity building of the vulnerable households in terms of disaster management. So from the lens of adaptive social protection, again, it is community centric. Community is right at the heart of this. And this is the drive right now by the international development sector to transition to adaptive social protection. So now coming to the gender centric, of course, is women are always disadvantaged. I mean, the more I work into gender, the more I realize that in every domain, it's a disproportionate impact. Whether it's women who are micro entrepreneurs, the impact faced by them is much more. There's like decline of sustainability, decline of jobs, and this exacerbated inequalities for them. So there's certain aspects that can deal with this kind of gender inequality, which is created especially for the social protection beneficiaries or the poor and the vulnerable women. Number one is that there has to be, I think so that financial and digital literacy is most cost effective. We have global evidence around it. And that is one of the entry points. Right now, we have very low financial literacy, especially very low digital literacy. And there's a need to enhance it. And it will definitely come if it is incentivized. There's no voluntary financial literacy enhancement or digital literacy enhancement. It doesn't work with the poor. We had a very widespread structure of BIS beneficiaries committee, which is dismantled, not operational now. It could have been leveraged for a lot of interventions since this structure was present throughout Pakistan. But since it was voluntary based, it stayed around for a couple of years, but eventually it got dismantled. So some incentive has to be there. The digital literacy and the financial literacy needs to be enhanced, and we need to think around it, that how it can be enhanced. For example, there's in Bangladesh, keeping financial diaries by social protection beneficiaries it has proven successful. So we can look into international best practices like this. Then again, one very important point which Dr. Safdar referred to, that if the out-of-pocket expenditures are to be borne by these beneficiaries, it's a diffuser in the system. No amount of financial inclusion, no amount of unconditional, conditional cash transfer is going to make up for this loss that they bear in one go in terms of paying for the health expenditures. So, and again, this is miscoordination of policies, that if diffusers in the systems, they're not disabled, we're not going to have the impact and the effect of enablers in the system, like financial inclusion, digital inclusion of this unconditional cash transfer or conditional related conditional cash transfers. Another aspect is to look into care economy. We really need to have a deeper lens on the care economy. These beneficiary women, they are primarily not working. And in South Asia, Pakistan has one of the highest number of hours in terms of this household work. So there's like the highest level of time poverty is experienced in Pakistan. And there has to be some mega drive towards marketization of jobs. I mean, they have to be absorbed through some industry, agri or mainstream industry. I mean, we have to look towards marketization of jobs at larger scales for these women with low literacy levels. And again, effective outreach programs are much needed, and they must be tailor-made according to population. And one of the programs we are running with GIZ right now, there's a whole segment on outreach, and there's hard evidence that for the population of interest, the social protection beneficiaries, the outreach program design is only conducive. It is the program design that is conducive is when the outreach or dissemination is through word of mouth or through vernacular announcement or at the community level. They're not able to comprehend the brochures or the even the announcements through television and radio, so that they have low perception and adaptation towards that. So again, it has to be, the design has to be evidence-based. And again, informal women entrepreneurs, again, informal workers, they have to be part of registry after a certain period of time, and access to finance for them. Again, in a number of countries of Africa, like Liberia, there's like very huge schemes that are going on, social protection schemes that are going for informal household enterprise workers, and it has equal ratio for women. So gender aspect is very much there. So we need to revisit our designs in terms of gender.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saiba. Keeping in view the time, I'll come up with the last question, and the same question will be posed to all three panelists. I'll start off with Dr. Safdar. In view of the current economic situation, what innovative measures are required for the expansion and adoption of the social protection system in Pakistan? I'll request if you could provide us with 3 staunch policy recommendations that would be more focused towards short to medium term.
Now, it's good way to approach it. 3 key proposals that would keep the whole discussion well under focus. Well, I have said during my interventions, given different proposals, the number 1 proposal is to make the provision of health, in-kind provisioning of health, as a responsibility of the state. That is one major way forward. Dr. Freya has spoken about the global experience. In this case, the global experience says that health has to be primarily the responsibility of the state, we do follow more a certain model of insurance, I'm talking about the US health insurance system, I think we should look at the European models more, and we should look at China in particular, what is happening here. And we need to remember that in a country where regulatory efficiencies are poor, if you lionize the private sector, even if this is a sector which has a big component of publicness, the private sector would not spare the patient, would not spare the clients from exploiting it. Now, this needs a separate debate, that is health an area where you should allow the free market, and the free market with Pakistani characteristics, where the health service, for example, is not really interested to self-regulate or to undergo any discipline. So that is number one. The second, in the short term, is that the districts where the multidimensional poverty index is very high, and where the natural calamities have been frequent, or recently they've hit hard, particularly in rural Sindh and Balochistan, for some time one should go for universal basic income, because it's these very districts where NSCR has serious issues. So that is, UBI is a term which I'm using for the sake of convenience, but basically giving a higher level of social transfer to everybody. Now, in most of the provinces of Balochistan, if the multidimensional poverty index is 80% plus, you can go for universal social transfers to every household. You can appeal to the affluent people not to apply for that, but that is going to help them tremendously. We all have heard these sad stories of early marriages, for example, happening, parents selling children, parents pushing their daughters into such professions which are very exploitative and problematic. So here, if we go local in our approaches, that should be very helpful. The third suggestion, which actually is, I'm echoing what two of my other colleagues have said, actually community is should be the primary unit for taking care of the vulnerabilities. In the current disposition, we have social protection primarily as a provincial subject. Then we had a national program. Then we had a period where the national program was expanded in mandates in the previous government. And we allowed the in-kind provision of social welfare services to be dismantled. Even now, Islamabad has 10 community welfare centers. There are social case workers there. You see, the systems have been there. In 80s, we established these social welfare departments. We have people who usually would have masters in sociology or social work. They have been visiting households also. So we have to reinvent the community. I don't use the word community-based, because here this was union council-based and the district administration had a role in that. So we should try to leverage the community-based initiatives which our colleagues talked about, but then revive the formal social welfare services at the union council level, at the district level, and bring in a large number of volunteers. So you see, when we talk about social protection, it's not only about the financial vulnerability, it's about the rights also. Now in Pakistan, giving inheritance to the children with disability is becoming a huge problem. Even parents are forced now to abdicate their property rights in favor of children. Now, Eastern Punjab has now a law that if a parent gives property to the children and the children don't behave, they can restitute the property back from the children. In Maharashtra, in India, for example, the local police has this responsibility to visit the household which has an elderly person, to ask him directly that what is happening. And some have gone into penal side. Bangladesh and China both now has made it an offense to mistreat the parents. So all these are local solutions. But at the same time, as Dr. Faria has said, that we need to liberate our women from this forced labor at home. If there is a child with disability at home, now the whole of the household literally becomes captive to that reality, which need not happen. If we can take care of our disability better, that would liberate those women from there. So the third thing that we need to have is to revive the in-kind provision of social welfare services at the union council level, at the district level, and integrate them with the community welfare initiatives, giving equal importance to the rights aspect, to the financial protection, to health, and general social well-being. Even awareness is a big problem in Pakistan. A lot of households, particularly I'm thinking of old age and disability, who would take that awareness to them? Again, the social welfare services who would engage them. Education, of course, goes without saying. So strengthening the social protection services at the local level is one of the important steps. And with the kind of inflation that we have, I think we should reverse the financialization of social services in a big way and take help out and revive the in-kind provision of social welfare services at the local level. That would be very important. And of course, we should continue with the social financial protection and bring work back into the equation, which we have not spoken today. Both of our colleagues, their friends also, they didn't utter the word work even once during their presentations.
I'll move to Mustafa Saab, and the same question is being posed to you.
Thank you. So I think, for the sake of, in the interest of time, I mean, I also had the same, points which Dr. Suhail mentioned. So I'll just, add some of the things that, this setting up these local, community-based structures or reviving those structures, the principle of subsidiarity. So, I mean, in a multi-tiered governance structure, you need to have, the decisions need to be made as close to the communities as possible. And how do you sort of, transform that into practice? I mean, there's some ideas in my mind around creation of a social protection fund at the community level. So, I mean, at that grassroots level, after union council, now we have village councils. In the rural areas, we have neighborhood councils, which is a smaller unit. So, I mean, at that level, we need to, revive or strengthen those structures. Maybe we, most of the development fund, most of the fund that is, if transferred at that level, is spent on brick and mortar. So, I mean, making roads, and because, it's a system, it's a public procurement system where there are, commissions involved and interest involved. So maybe, earmarking some fund there. The second, recommendation that would come to my mind is public-private partnership. I mean, in most of the developed countries in the world, the government, gives NGOs the grants, and the NGOs are basically, providing services. I'll not name the department, but, I know of one department that disburses an amount of 1.2 billion annually, and they have an operating expense of 50 crore. So, I mean, imagine. And most of our public departments are, basically essentially public works program. They're just job creation programs, And looking at the economic situation, the financial situation of the country, we cannot basically sustain that. We need to, in the last tenure of provincial government in KP, they did an excellent pilot of drug rehabilitation with these big NGOs. There was Al Khidmat, there was I forgot the name of other two, but there were three NGOs that were basically given a target, and these were like these three NGOs are the experts of the field. They have been doing this drug rehabilitation for the last many decades. They have all the so I mean there was a technical pre-qualification, there was a financial pre-qualification, and then they basically like submitted their financial bids, and based on the lowest price they were awarded, they were given a certain quota and a certain amount to sort of like use that the international guideline for drug rehabilitation. I think it's a couple of months cycle, so and that stand out to be like one of the best examples. This very recent, last year it happened in KP, and the cost of like rehabilitating one drug addict was I think 10% of the cost that was there in the government system. So public-private partnership models, local level, reviving or setting up local level structures. The third one that I would like emphasize is a systems-based approach to social protection, which I also like mentioned earlier in my because one of the reasons social protection is ignored or like in such state which we are seeing today is like it's essentially a multi-sectoral area. So I mean if you look at the administrative departments we are having, there's social protection happening in social welfare department, there's social welfare department, there's social protection happening in Zakat department, in education department, in health department, in industries department, in the federal Baitul Mal base. I mean the list goes on and on. Every department is involved in social protection delivery in one way or another. And we need to have a like a institutional home for social protection preferably at the provincial level, because like provincial after the 18th amendment the subject has been devolved to. So I mean I know this system-based approach to social protection is a very broad concept, but it's a very broad term, but we need to like make sense of this term, and at least try to like understand this concept and then implement. And I'll also make reference to like health system strengthening. This is how that the WHO and the international like experts, international guidance basically was, I think to a greater extent able to reform the health systems, because when they started thinking on a health system strengthening approach, the 6 building blocks of health systems. So you have financing, you have human resource, you have medicine, you have technology. So I mean we need to also adapt, because there needs to be a whole of a government approach. You cannot like work in one area and ignore others. Thank you.
So Dr. Saiba, 3 recommendations.
Sure, thank you. Number one would be to think around sustainable models of social protection. We need to raise the bar. We need to raise this ask from social protection delivery mechanism. It's not about consumption smoothing. It's about sustainability by the end of the day. And the starting point is saving, because there's global evidence that the households that were most resilient to crisis were the ones who had savings or a certain kitty to face the crisis. And again, for example, one of the largest social protection programs in Pakistan right now is CRISP, Crisis Resilient Social Protection, and a huge segment of that program has this component of hybrid social protection scheme, which is meant for the exited beneficiaries, the ones who are no longer receiving the program. And this shows that even after exiting the program, this population needs handholding and support because of the catastrophes or floods, the pandemic, and these are going to persist in future as well. So need to rethink in terms of sustainable models because this graduation is dynamic in nature. I mean, these people are going back and forth into poverty. And it's an ugly face of poverty. I mean, if you have heard recently the Balochistan climate brides, that how these crisis and poverty-stricken people, how they were selling young female child of theirs to settle the debt. So again, second, so I mean, co-contributory models must be attempted, and whether we like it or not, the population of interest, they have to save. Somehow they have to save, and they got to have this kitty for the future. Second is again to revert to community-based models of social protection that factor in disaster resilience reduction lens. This is again need of the hour, and we must look into it through the angle of adaptive social protection. And third is to avoid the black box in social protection product design. Again, I will emphasize on a very sound theory of change that is flexible enough, where we have this flexibility of resetting our priors if the theory of change log frames break down. And normally what happens is that interventions are designed, and then it all goes into a black box, and God knows what will be the impact by the end of the day. So the product design must be very intricate. We must be very sure of the 4 pillars: intervention, outcome, output, and the eventual impact. And pilot testing with sound techniques is very important. Before launching of an intervention, pilot testing, where the impact of that intervention design can be quantified with very refined techniques, it must be there. I mean, that cost will save this scaling and innovation at macro level that would come later on and may not give the desired results.
Thank you very much. With your permission, we'll be taking only 2 questions. So we do understand that we're out of time. So if anyone has a question, so Ji, please.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. Engineer Mansoor Khan speaking here. SDPI का मैंने सुना तो काफी दफा था, इसके बारे में सुना है, लेकिन first time I am visiting here. Basically, I am an engineer by profession and a philanthropist and a social activist as well. I have worked in almost all the disasters in the country, and there are many learnings. I am trying to write a book on that even. Since the time is short, काफी कुछ points मैंने लिखे थे, लेकिन आप लोगों ने भी cover कर लिए, उसमें से काफी सारे. एक चीज जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है वो ये है कि जो लोकल जो आप कह लें कि अप्रोचेस होती हैं, दे आर मोर प्रैक्टिकल एंड दे बेयर द गुड रिजल्ट्स, और हर एरिया जो है उसका अपने डायनामिक्स होते हैं, एंड वी हैव टू while making the policies and the processes and whatever, we need to include all those areas specifics. Along with that, I was reading somewhere that 450 billions plus we are giving in this Benazir income support program and other programs also in practice. And in comparison, Bangladesh has alleviated the people from poverty line with much better practices, which we can think over and when we can try adopting them. Because in my humble experience, giving money every month, that ठीक है, for a short period of time, that is a relief, but in long term that doesn't work. So we know we need to work on entrepreneurship and self-reliance of local public in every area. We are doing some practical work in this area. I can share offline as well, but this needs to be incorporated, that entrepreneurship and local self-reliance, that is the key to progress. Otherwise, this circle will keep on going like this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your humbles. Please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Sajid Hussain Malik. I worked in different capacities. A retired senior researcher from Ministry of Law, main registrar of companies, legal advisor, Azad Jammu Kashmir, Supreme Court, High Court. I have too much experience in connection with these subjects. I will say in Urdu. पहली बात इसमें ये है कि ये जो टॉपिक है ایک ٹاپک کافی نہیں ہے, اتنا سینسٹیو یہ ایشو ہے, اس کے لیے کئی سیمینارز کی ضرورت ہے. اور میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ جو سوشل سٹیٹس ہیں وہ ویسے نہیں بن گئی. مثال کے طور پر کہا جاتا ہے کہ سویلائز سوسائٹی کی جو ڈیفینیشن ہے وہ اس کی دو بنیادیں ہیں, وہاں پہ عورتوں کے ساتھ کیا سلوک ہوتا ہے اور منارٹیز کے ساتھ کیا سلوک ہوتا ہے. منارٹیز کے ساتھ جو ہم سلوک کرتے ہیں وہ جڑوں والا واقعہ آپ کے سامنے. سندھ میں کمپلسری کنورشن آف ریلیجن ہو رہی ہے, خواتین کو ٹکڑے ٹکڑے کر کے, اتنے بڑے بڑے کیسز آپ نے دیکھے ہوں گے, ابھی تک کوئی فیصلہ نہیں ہوا. تو یہ تو ہماری ہے سول سوسائٹی. اس میں ضرورت اس امر کی ہے کہ جو خواتین ہیں یا بچے ہیں, بیسیکلی نیشنل ڈیفنس یونیورسٹی نے ہمارے لا ڈویژن رابطہ کیا, انہوں نے کہا جی ہم خواتین اور جو بچے ہیں ان کے قوانین جو ہے اپڈیٹ کرنا چاہتے ہیں. تو وہ میں نے ایک لسٹ تیار کی پورے پروونشل اور فیڈرل گورنمنٹ کی. پتہ چلا کہ خواتین اور بچوں کے متعلق جو قوانین ہیں وہ 148 تھے. اس کو اپ ٹو ڈیٹ کرنے کی کوشش کی تو آپ اندازہ لگائیں, جہاں 148 ہیں, نہ بچوں کو پتہ ہے نہ خواتین کو پتہ ہے ان کے رائٹس کیا ہیں. دوسری بات ہے کانسٹیٹیوشن میں پروٹیکشن ہے وومن رائٹس کی, جتنی آپ نے گفتگو کی. مطلب یہ ہے کہ اس کی امپلیمنٹیشن کیسے ہوگی. اس وقت جو خواتین اور بچے, خاص کر میں ARY میں رپورٹ دیکھ رہا تھا, اس میں بتا رہے تھے بلوچستان میں کئی علاقے ہیں وہاں میں ان کی فصلیں تباہ ہو گئیں, غریب ہو گئے. وہاں کے جو امیر لوگ تھے انہوں نے ان کی مدد کی, گورنمنٹ نہیں گئی, اور مدد کے بدلے ان کی بچیاں خرید لیں چھوٹی عمر کی, اور 40 سے لکھا ہوا تھا 60 تک جو لوگ تھے انہوں نے ان سے شادیاں کر لی. تو یہ ہمارے یہاں وومن روٹس ہیں. آخری میں ایک سمپل بات کروں گا, اس کا حل کیا ہے. امام خمینائی ہیں, روحانی لیڈر ہیں ایران کے, انہوں نے تہران یونیورسٹی, جمعہ خطبہ ہوتا ہے ان کا, انہوں نے امام کو کہا کہ میں دنیا کی سب سے بڑی مسجد بنانا چاہتا ہوں تو آپ فنڈ دیں. اتنا فنڈ آیا کہ آپ تصور ہی نہیں کر, کیونکہ ان سے روحانی بھی وابستگی ہے لوگوں کی. وہ جب فنڈ جمع ہو گیا تو انہوں نے ایک خطبے میں پھر ارشاد فرمایا کہ آپ کا کیونکہ پیسہ ہے, اگر آپ اجازت دیں تو مسجد تو پھر بھی بن جائے گی, اور بھی مساجد ہیں. میں چاہتا ہوں پورے ملک میں کمپیوٹر سینٹر کھول دیا جائے. اور انہوں نے پورے ملک میں کمپیوٹر سینٹر کھولے اور ٹیکنیکلی تعلیم دی. تو میں سمجھتا ہوں رول آف لا اگر بحال ہو جائے تو ہر چیز کی سوشل پروٹیکشن ہو سکتی ہے. مثال کے طور پر ڈسٹرکٹ کورٹس لاہور دیکھیں, آج سیکنڈ تیسرا دن ہے, انہوں نے کورٹ ہی بند کر دیا وکلا نے, اور وہ جو عدالتیں ہمیں پروٹیکٹ کرتی ہیں وہ خود ان پروٹیکٹڈ. اس پہ ہمیں پریکٹیکلی سوچنا چاہیے کہ بھائی ہم کیا کرنا چاہتے ہیں, کیونکہ فنڈنگ دینے سے مسئلہ حل نہیں ہوگا, بلکہ اس طرح تو اور عادی ہو جائیں گے لوگ کہ ہمیں کوئی چیز مل رہی ہے یا نہیں مل رہی. تو میں دوبارہ SDPI کا شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں کہ باقی بھی اچھی کانفرنس ہیں, لیکن آج کا جو پروگرام ہے ٹاپ پہ ہے. تھینک یو.
Thank you very much. Last comment یا question جی.
Question, sir. Actually, do you think our system has the capacity not to reinvent the wheel, but to fix those suggestions in the existing model, correct that model, and then implement it? Because every endeavor that you propose or suggestion you made, that will demand capital. The government is resource constrained at the moment. They are not going to support that initiative at any level. So do you think your suggestions can fit into that system, like the local community models, the UC level models? Did they ever existed before in our system? So will this process be a long-term or lengthy process, or it can be done easily without making many big fixtures in the system? Your comments on that?
تھینک یو جی فار دس کوشچن. دیکھیے جی, میں نے جو ریکمنڈیشنز دی ہیں وہ one of the recommendations I made was for public-private partnership. So this was exactly to address this issue of huge operating expenditures. The other recommendation that I gave was, like using an integrated approach, systems-based approach. So all of these, like recommendations basically, like point towards efficiency in service delivery. So مطلب ہم جو بات کر رہے ہیں وہ اخراجات بڑھانے کی بات نہیں کر رہے, بلکہ اخراجات کو کم کرنے کی بات کر رہے ہیں.
Again, yes, I would say that some of these suggestions, they are of long-term nature. Like for example, thinking around sustainable models, how to factor in saving into this model for actually dealing with shocks and crisis. So that is already happening. I mean, मैंने आपको वैसे example दे दिया, one of the largest program is actually trying to deliver on this. And then, for example, avoiding black box. So this is like incorporating the evidence-based lens. And again, there's a lot of sensitization among civil services and in program design, that how we can actually look from the angle of evidence-based policy design, and it's not a public policy failure by the end of the day. Or कुछ changes हैं, for example, when I talk about care economy, I think so until unless there's some very fast track and very deep-rooted intervention dealing with patriarchy, it's a very long-term change. It's an institutional change that will come in years and years. Like there are again interventions designed, for example, entrepreneurship को अगर aggravate किया जाए, या इसी तरह creation of jobs, marketization of jobs, and they can actually counter this deep-rooted patriarchy and in a much shorter period of time. So there is a design to come around every problem, even if they're long-term, it can be tackled. And we do understand that there is diminishing fiscal space, yet our fiscal allocations and the conditionalities of the IMF program are such that they're asked for enhancement of the program. So if you see, the number of beneficiaries have actually increased over time, like from 4 million before and in the past couple of years to 9 million right after COVID. So, but I think so the specifics should be that these allocations must come down to a sustainable model rather than just cashing out, or just like a simple recurrent cash transfers that are not alleviating poverty by the end of the day. Now the ask has to be poverty alleviation. It's not, the graduation is not exiting out of the program. The graduation must factor in this graduation from poverty.
That is the name of the game exactly. And at least in my view, what I'm suggesting is exactly on this very point, that your health response was not sustainable. The Sehat Sahulat was not sustainable right from the beginning. We have been saying so, but well, they continued with that, and now this is stopped. But this stoppage has costs. In 2013, the then government which came into power wanted to strengthen the public health delivery, and they announced the construction of 39 hospitals in 2013. So once we changed the tax in 2015, we stopped that, and then we started discussing that what do we do with the public health infrastructure, which had been built with trillions of rupees for the future generations. So now one wrong policy turn can create big problems. And if you liberate the financial resources that Pakistanis spend on health, which is in multiple of trillions, and ask some of those ones to channelize those savings as contributory mechanism for work for the institutional social security and old age pension, the financial picture is much better, right? So that is for the sustainability. Now this giving universal basic income to selected districts, this is very much feasible because provinces have a lot of money which they are not able to spend. There it's a question of will simply, and that is not a very big expense. The third one, that is the community one, that precisely is the point that if we revive the in-kind provision of services, that would be much less expensive. And as far as your comments is concerned, that did they exist? Yes, they did exist. I mean, they exist even now. They were established in early 80s, and the infrastructure is very much there. May not be very efficient, but the point is that I think one of the lessons our colleagues have spoken about the best practices in the world, in my view, in health, public and private sector cannot coexist. As long as you will not completely disband the private sector in health, you would not be able to make any headway in the direction that we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely thankful to the eminent panelists for their thought-provoking recommendations in the discussion. और मैं आप सबका मशकूर हूँ जी, आप लोगों ने टाइम दी और हम सबको सुना. इंशाल्लाह हमारी ये मंडे सीरीज है, and next Monday we'll be announcing another webinar. एक सेमिनार होगा जिसमें आप लोग शामिल हो सकते हैं. Thank you जी, thank you very much.